And this is a picture of Amy. She has a thing about cows, and that is with my oldest son, Felix, who was then obviously about 6 months to 8 months old, I think. And Amy was shocking him, even at that stage of his young life. This is on Amy's island, Shiraishi. Amy lives in the middle of the inland sea on a lovely island. And there she has something surprisingly called the moo bar. And this is why she gets dressed up in this particular garb. Without further ado, over to you, Amy. Welcome.
Okay. My name is Amy Chavez, and thank you, Paul, for that very nice introduction. And I'm really excited to talk to everyone about Japanese etiquette today. A little bit about myself. I was born in Ohio, USA, and I've lived in Japan for 30 years, and most of that time on a small island in the Seto Inland Sea. And that's actually where I met Paul originally. And I have been a columnist for the Japan Times, and I have also written several books on Japan. My hobbies are skiing and sailing and hiking and trail running, and I love to read books. And I also started a website and a podcast called Books on Asia, and in order to share my love of Japanese literature and books on Japan. And as Paul pointed out, I am obsessed with cows. But today we're going to talk about Japanese etiquette. And I know that etiquette can be kind of a tricky word. It's almost kind of scary, but it's good to keep in mind that etiquette is really culture. So when we talk about Japanese etiquette, we're talking about Japanese culture. And there are usually good reasons behind these etiquette points. And I'll try to explain those as we go along. And I do think that because the world over, we're going through this over-tourism problem, that in the old days in Japan, so few people came here that people didn't really need to worry so much about their etiquette. People were very forgiving, the Japanese people, and they still are to a certain point. But when you're dealing with these poor people these staff members and people working in restaurants and accommodation who are dealing with, maybe 100 or more foreigners a day, they do get tired of people not knowing basic etiquette. So let's be that good tourist and let's make their day because we know what we're doing and they will appreciate it so much. So today I'm going to cover 3 areas: accommodations, meals, and then also some travel tips. So let's get started. So my speech is titled Japanese Etiquette, or All the Simple Things I Wish Someone Had Told Me Before I Came to Japan. And it's from my book called Amy's Guide to Best Behavior in Japan. And we're only going to cover a very small portion of what's in there, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And you're going to be so glad that you joined this webinar today, because it's going to make your trip to Japan so much more enjoyable for both you and for your hosts. So first, we're going to talk about at your accommodations. And your accommodations may be a ryokan or a minshuku, which are traditional Japanese style inns. And these are often found in the countryside. We're going to talk about shoe and slipper etiquette, entering a Japanese room, how to lay out your own futon, how to put on the sleeping yukata that they will provide. We're going to talk about using Japanese toilets and what all those fancy buttons mean. And we're also going to talk about how to take a Japanese bath. So first, shoes and slippers. When you get to your accommodation, you're going to have to take off your shoes and you're going to put on slippers. And these slippers are for inside the accommodation, only inside. So the best way to know when you have to take off your shoes, whether it be at your accommodation or somewhere else, is to look for the barriers, such as steps. When it's obvious, they're going to be steps. Other times, it might just be the threshold of a door. But if you look around, there will be some indications that you should be taking off your shoes and putting on slippers. If you look at the little drawing here, you'll see that there are a pair of slippers on the top step waiting for the guest to walk into them. So the way you take off your shoes is quite important as well. It's simply a matter of stepping out of the shoes onto the step and into the slippers. Now, what you need to be careful here of is that you're not taking off your shoes and then walking around on that tiled area and then up onto the steps, because the point of the barrier is that it delineates the outside from the inside. So the outside is dirty and the inside is clean. So you don't want to be tracking the outside dirt into the accommodation. There are going to be other times while you're in the accommodation that you'll have to take off those slippers that you just put on. And those will be some places which I will talk about. And if you're worried about these slippers, because they are communal slippers, many people will use the same slippers. And if you're worried about foot fungus, that is certainly a valid reason, which is why technically you're supposed to wear socks when you put on slippers. So this is something where, you know, you might be out and about in your own sandals, and then you get to the ryokan and you'll be like, oh, I'm in bare feet. Well, go ahead and put on your slippers. But if you're in a more formal situation, you really should even maybe carry a set of socks with you. Next is in your Japanese room. And, oops. Sorry. The tokonoma alcove, which is labeled here in black, this room is labeled tokonoma, is an alcove where they display traditional Japanese arts. And you can see a scroll in there. And this area is really just for the arts, so try not to store your luggage there or to sit there. There will also often be some vases, maybe some flowers in there as well. And then the sliding doors to the left are called shoji, which are the paper doors. And there's also another type of door called fusuma, which is also a sliding door. The fusuma is basically the same door as the shoji, but it has an outer thick covering on it and is more almost like a wallpaper. So there will often be designs on it. Now, if you are coming into this room from the outside and you see those shoji doors or fusuma, that means you're going to have to change out of your slippers. And in this case, you'll walk straight onto the tatami in your bare feet if it's your own room, or if you're in another place, then you should be wearing socks. If it's a house or a restaurant, you should be wearing socks. And so you never step onto the tatami mat with your slippers on, because the slippers can scuff the tatami mat. When you get into your room, you'll see a low tea table in the center of the room with hot water and a thermos and tea bags. And what you're supposed to do when you check into your room is you're supposed to sit down, relax, and have a cup of tea. At the end of the day, if it's a ryokan, your futons will probably be laid out for you, and they'll lay them out right on top of the tatami mat. But if they're not laid out, then you're going to have to do it yourself. So when you see them, they're going to be in a closet, and they're going to look like this photo on the left. And so you have your two pillows at the top. The first two sheets, they go over on top of the futon. The two in the middle, the white ones, are the bottom, the actual futon layer. So this is a set for two people. And then the very bottom one is just like a mattress cover to go over the futon. So the way I tell people to remember the order is to think of a chicken sandwich. So your duvet covers, which are the striped ones in the picture, are on top of the futon. And the futons in the middle, the white ones, are the bottom. And then you are the chicken and you go into the middle of it. So you'll have a fluffy top and a thicker and firmer bottom. And then don't lay with your head facing north. Now, if you look at this little icon, that's actually an urn. And that urn is an indication that this point relates to funeral rites. So you really want to try to avoid these things, so you don't remind people of a Japanese funeral, and some people may be offended. So in this case, get out your cell phone, find out which direction is north, and make sure your head is not facing north, because that's the way they lay out people after they've died. You'll also probably have some kind of cotton yukata in your room. And these you can use for sleeping in. You can also wear them around the ryokan or the accommodation, and you can wear them to the public bath. And the word kimono is, the meaning is actually just Japanese clothing. So whenever I use the word kimono, you're probably thinking of something really fancy, maybe geisha, but actually kimono is used for any type of clothing that is Japanese. So this is Japanese cotton yukata that they provide there, a type of kimono, and they're very comfortable to walk around in. However, if you're in public with them in the accommodation, you may feel more confident wearing a t-shirt or a camisole underneath, because they do tend to kind of gape at the top. So if you're out and about, then you might just want to, wear something underneath. And I think that gaping part happens because the kimono, just kind of gets pulled, around in different areas. So that's just one way to make sure you don't have to worry about that. And then all Japanese kimonos should be arranged with the front panels left over right. So look at the photo on the right, and the left is over the right, is, pulled over the right. And the reason why it's left over right is because the opposite, right over left, is again how they dress people once they've passed. So you'll see that at a Japanese funeral. So let's keep it left over right. And then you can tie your the sash around your waist any way that you find comfortable. Next is using the toilet. So when you go into a Japanese toilet, there are going to be toilet slippers. So here's your next change of slippers to slippers toilets. So you just merely leave your other slippers out in the hallway and just slip your feet right into the toilet slippers. And then the reason they have toilet slippers, because they take a while to get used to. And the reason they have toilet slippers is because the Japanese toilets used to be just a hole in the ground that you squatted over. So it wasn't actually very hygienic. And now most of the toilets in Japan are Western style that you sit down on, but they have kept this custom from long ago. And also, I think there's still the idea that the toilet's the dirtiest room in the house. So the last thing you want to do is forget to change out of these toilet slippers into your regular slippers. And I have made that mistake. And it's very embarrassing because usually someone else notices it before you do. And then you realize that you have just tracked all these toilet germs all over their house or wherever you are. So some of the toilets in Japan will have a place in back. I'm now looking at the drawing on the right, where you can wash your hands. And they're just using the tank water that's used to flush the toilet. So it's clean water. Feel free to use that to rinse your hands off. And a little bit of language is that if you use the English word toilet, everyone will understand what you mean. They will not understand other words, WC, bathroom, restroom, powder room, etc. The Japanese word for toilet is actually toire, which is close enough and most people understand the English word as well. And then nowadays we have really fancy toilets in Japan, even in the public toilets. So there's an explanation in store for what all those buttons mean. So when you walk into a toilet, picture on the left, often the toilet seat will even open for you. But at any rate, when you sit down on the toilet, you'll probably notice that it is warm. They do warm the toilet seats. And here are your buttons that you're going to find next to the toilet. There's the stop button, which does exactly that. It stops whatever mechanics you've started. And then there's a little icon that says shower, but actually that's not really a proper English translation. What that means is that this is to wash off your behind, your bottom, for number twos. And then next to that is bidet, which will wash for women. And then next to that, you'll see a low and a high designation, and that's just the seat temperature. And then lastly, you have a dial, and that controls the strength of the water coming out of the bidet and the shower here. So I recommend you start that off in the middle somewhere before you decide what is most comfortable for you. And then taking a Japanese bath, up in the right, you'll see a red icon of steaming water. And that's the universal icon for a public bath or an onsen. The difference between an onsen and then your more local baths called sento is that the onsen is spring water, and it has lots of nutrients, and it's supposed to be good for your skin and for your health. When you approach it, there will be two curtains, and on the left or right, it's not always the same. So the men will go into a curtain that is blue or light blue, and the women will go into a curtain that is red or pink. And these are kind of quaint old-time colors for men and women, but you'll actually probably be pretty happy to see them when it comes to Japan, because you might not understand the kanji that is on the curtains and does tell you. The one on the right is for women and the one on the left is for men in this case. Take off your shoes before entering the changing room. Again, look for the step or other places where people have taken off their shoes, and there will be slippers for you. And then put your clothes and bath towel into one of the baskets or lockers. And you'll have a smaller hand towel that either you will get from your room in your accommodation, or you can bring your own, and you'll take that with you once you've taken off all your clothes and put everything into that basket or locker, whichever you're given. Then you will walk into the bathing area, and there will be, if it's a big bath, there will be a whole wall, a bank of showers. And if it's a smaller one, which is just shared among maybe people at the accommodation, if it's a smaller accommodation, you'll see one or two showers. And there's a small mirror in front of each and a small plastic stool. So you shower first to get clean, and you do this sitting down. So it's all very safe and it's quite relaxing. And then so when you're sitting down, that's when you wash yourself thoroughly using the hand towel as a washcloth. And they will provide the soap and the shampoo for you there. When you're finished washing off, rinse yourself completely. Make sure there's no soap suds on you. Wring out your hand towel, and then you'll walk over to the communal tub. And you may use the towel to modestly shield your private parts from view, but watch what others are doing and follow suit. It's really merely hanging that towel over your arm in front of yourself. So I've noticed that this kind of varies from region to region. In Okayama, where I live, everyone always covers themselves, but I have been to other places where people don't seem to care at all. And they'll just walk around with the towel to the side. So whatever you're comfortable with is the way to go. And then you are ready to ease into the tub and soak. They're quite hot, so it may take a little bit of time to get used to the water, and then you can slowly lower yourself in. And the important thing is that your bath or your hand towel should not go into the bath water. A lot of the Japanese will fold it and place it on top of their heads. And also you can tie it around your head to help keep your hair up. And if you have long hair, it definitely should be tied up, whether it's with an elastic band or something to make sure it doesn't hang in the water. Never let the water out of a bath. If other people are going to use it, it will not be refilled each time. They use the same water for each person. And it makes sense when you consider that everyone's clean before they go in. So do make sure that you've showered off before you get in. If it's a big bath, please don't swim in the bath. Don't put your head underneath. And when you come out of the bath, wipe your body off of excess water before re-entering the changing area. And you can use that hand towel, your washcloth, for that you've rinsed out or that you've wrung out. And it will be dry enough to get any excess water off of you. And then after bathing, many people like to have a cold drink from a vending machine or a bottle of water to rehydrate. And they'll do that when they're back out into the changing room. But don't take any food or beverages into the bathing area. Next is dining etiquette and Japanese meals. This is part 2. We're going to talk about several things here: Japanese food presentation, table manners, chopstick faux pas, kaiseki meals, food waste, drinking protocol, and a few language tips for you. So this is, really, eating in Japan is a culinary adventure, and it's such a delight to the eyes. And this Japanese meal here is actually a breakfast at a ryokan. So what we have here, and I will start from left to right and go up in an arc. So starting at the bottom left, we have an egg. Then in back of the egg is a piece of mackerel fish. To the right of that is rice. And on top of the rice is a brown lacquer bowl, and that has miso soup inside. All the way over to the right, we have tofu, and it's in a dish that underneath it's actually a brazier. So it's heated underneath with a small candle. It's called yudofu. And to the right is some of the sauce for that. And above, which is hard to see, is some spring onions and shaved bonito flakes. Bonito's fish. And then we have between the tofu and the rice, we have some pickled vegetables, which is, in this case, is cucumber, melon, and turnip. And then up at the top, we have green tea. Now, in this, there's no special order that you have to adhere to when you eat your food, but most Japanese people will start with the miso soup and rice and then move to anything in back of that. But also, it's, as far as manners go, really anything is okay, but there's a lot of chopstick etiquette, which we'll get to later. And one thing is, you look at all this beautiful food, and you might be tempted to kind of graze at first and hover over each one and kind of choose which one next. But you're not really supposed to do that. You're supposed to just dig in and enjoy your food. Now, some tips is you can bring the small bowls up near your chin to eat from them, as the illustration on the right shows. And this just makes it a little easier. And you can hold the bowl in your hand and eat. And that way also, it just helps that you might not drop any food from your chopsticks. And you're supposed to, when we're in a restaurant now, you're supposed to try to eat everything that you're served, especially if you're in a small restaurant where the chef is right there in front of your eyes. So he's an expert. He's called the master, and he takes great pride in his cooking. And this even goes down to the smallest neighborhood restaurants in Japan. The food is excellent. The chefs really concentrate on giving you the best food possible. So try to finish your food And also if it's a bigger restaurant and they brought in a special chef, which would be, maybe at your Kobe beef restaurants, Wagyu beef, certainly any of the Michelin rated restaurants, the food's just going to be amazing. So do try to finish it in deference to the chef. And then when you're using your chopsticks, try to grip them near the middle rather than down near the food. And never put butter or soy sauce over your rice. It's considered perfect the way it is. Then when you go in to sit down at a restaurant, you'll often be given a small wet towel. And this is called oshibori. And you should clean your hands off this before eating. And then when you're not using your chopsticks, because you should take your time and enjoy your meal in Japan. You don't just sit down and hoe. So you take your chopsticks, if you want to put them down for a while, take a break, maybe do some, conversation with your friends. You put your chopsticks on a chopsticks rest, but there isn't always one. So if there isn't a chopsticks rest, then you can put them on top of your bowl, the way, just like in the illustration, or you can put them on the chopsticks sleeve if they're wooden and they come in a paper sleeve, and that's also illustrated there. And then if you're eating from a communal plate, so a lot of times when you go out with Japanese people, they will order a lot of different foods so that you can try different things, and they may pass plates around. And in that case, try to take what you want from the plate before actually putting your chopsticks in your mouth. So after you've been eating a while and then going back to put your chopsticks in that communal plate is a bit of a no-no. It's kind of like double dipping in our language. So try to refrain from doing that. Take what you think you want at the beginning. And then while you're eating, don't use your chopsticks for other things. So don't play with them or use them as props to explain things. And then some chopstick faux pas. You don't want to lick your chopsticks, after you've been eating a while. And yeah, just don't do it. And then leaving the tips of the chopsticks lingering on your lips, such as when you're talking. I noticed that, some people do this and they don't mean to be rude, but it is rude in Japan. So chopsticks are for eating. So just use them for, when you're conveying the food to your lips, and also waving the chopsticks around in the air while talking or pointing them at other people. So another thing is using chopsticks with one in each hand. So eating with chopsticks is a very delicate procedure. And the more you use them, the more comfortable you'll get. But even when you get frustrated, try not to put one in each hand and attack it. And try to avoid relentlessly stabbing your food to get a hold of it. And then 2 chopstick no-nos. Again, we've got the urn there, so they must be related to funerals, is sticking your chopsticks vertically into a bowl of rice and leaving them there, or passing food between chopsticks. So instead of picking up a piece of food and then moving it over to the other person so they can take the same piece of food with the chopsticks, don't do that. Instead, just pick up the piece that you want to give to someone else and you just place it on their plate. I do this a lot with my husband because he always makes me look good because I am not a big eater. And so I don't want to leave food behind. So I'm constantly moving things over to his plate because I'm full. So that's also an option. Now, and then we move into Kaiseki meals. Now, Kaiseki is a very high-class way of eating. And if you could look at this here, it's really gorgeous. And these chefs spend a lot of time to get these picture perfect. Kaiseki may be served on individual trays as here, and sometimes an individual table. And because it's a traditional Japanese atmosphere, then don't eat in bare feet. You'll probably be in a tatami mat room as well when you're served this. But at any rate, make sure you have socks on. And even if you're wearing slippers, have your socks on. The preparation of kaiseki is an art, and the emphasis is on the presentation. So do admire it. And I mean, how can you not? It's so gorgeous, but there will be several servings. So once you're finished with the one above, for example, they'll bring you in the next tray. It's often served with two types of dashi. Dashi is the umami. It's a liquid. And the first one will be seasonal. And depending on which particular season you're in Japan, and you can drink this dashi just from the bowl. And the second one that's brought out has a stronger flavor. And it's actually not meant to be drank, but it's supposed to complement and go with a certain food in the meal. And they may explain that as well. And if you ever have any questions, just ask. When one or more fish is served, which is bound to happen with kaiseki, always start with the lighter fish and move to the darker fish. So example, red snapper is a whiter fish. And then from that, you would go to tuna, which is darker. Try to eat everything on the tray or plate in deference to the chef, especially with kaiseki. And then rice is served at the end of the meal, and this is also a signal to stop drink orders. Best not to linger after dessert. Now, I have to bring up food waste. It's very, very important, so bear with me on this. But the way of cultivating rice in Japan is very time-consuming and labor-intensive. So the Japanese people have developed an appreciation for rice growing, and they tend not to leave even a grain uneaten. So never leave your rice uneaten. If you opt for a smaller portion, which is fine, then you can always ask for more later in the meal. And this is always true for rice and usually tea or drinks, is that you can get another helping. When you are offered rice, you may decide you just can't eat that much food, or you don't want the rice, then you may politely turn it down. And it's better to turn it down than to accept it and then not eat it. When eating sushi or sashimi, use the soy sauce sparingly. You can always add more of that too. That's something that's usually sitting out on the table, or if it's not, you can ask for more. It's okay to skip a course. And also if you, for example, decline the rice, you can still take dessert. That's totally fine. As long as you eat what you're given is basically the idea here. If there's something you cannot eat, allergies or for whatever reason, then in kaiseki, leave the dish sitting there as it is, rather than decimating it on the plate and not eating it anyway. So you have to think of the food as an artistic display. So if you're not going to eat it, just leave it that way so that it still retains its beauty. You do not have to eat all of your food all of the time. However, do tell the server beforehand if you can't eat a certain item. And not eating an item is wasteful. And it's just wasteful in every way. It goes into the resources that went into making and preparing the food, all of it. So in Japan, we try not to have food waste. It's really a good policy to adopt almost anywhere you are. And this is a quote from someone I know who is the CEO of a yakiniku restaurant. And she says, respect the food's life, the plants, the animals, and the chef's effort to use this life for you, down to cleaning every last grain of rice from the bowl. I rarely see a piece of our beef left uneaten, but when I do, I feel deep grief and a little anger for the sake of the cow. And I think that anyone can understand that. Next is drinking protocol. If there's a toast, if you're at a gathering, or perhaps if you're with a tour group, also, they might want to make a toast or give some messages before everyone starts eating. So do wait until the toast is given before you start drinking from your glass. And I still sometimes make this mistake because, they'll go around, they'll serve everyone beer, and then it's just sitting there getting warm. And sometimes I just forget. But as soon as I get it to my lips, I'm like, oh, right. So do wait. It's considered polite. And if you're in a group, Japanese people will usually wait until all members are present before taking the first sip. So it is important that everyone is there for the toast. So try not to be late arriving. And when you're drinking with Japanese people, do not refill your own glass. This is considered, the etiquette is that people are sharing in the drinking experience and you pour for each other. So you offer to refill someone else's glass and in return, they'll fill yours. And when you do this, just like the illustration, always pour with two hands. And it's also nice on the receiving end if you pick up your glass and hold it for the person. Do not feel pressured to drink alcohol. You know, there's no reason you should really have to drink alcohol. You can toast with anything non-alcoholic to even a cola. So the important thing is that you have some kind of liquid in your glass. Some language tips for meals. Itadakimasu. That means I humbly receive and refers not to just the meal, but also gives a nod to all that went into providing the meal, from the plants and the animals to the farmer and the chef. And it's usually said with a bit of gusto, thus the exclamation point, itadakimasu. And then they'll often put their hands together at the same time in a praying gesture. Okawari kudasai means one more serving. So this is used when you would like a refill of rice and sometimes coffee or tea. And then gochiso sama deshita, that is what you say at the end of a meal. And it says, thank you for this wonderful meal or this feast. And again, said with some gusto, gochiso sama deshita. And then oishi means it's delicious. So people will often ask you, oh, how is the meal or how is it? And you can say oishi. And then when you're drinking, inevitably, the Japanese will say kanpai. And they kanpai a lot. They'll touch the glasses and before they drink. So now some travel tips, and I'll try to get in a few stories in here quickly, but this is an illustration of two cats in the rain, and the one cat says, beautiful day, isn't it? And the other cat's like, what? So try to give sarcasm a miss in Japan. Sarcasm is not normally used in conversation here, and it's going to especially confuse people if they really don't speak English that well anyway, so they're listening to your literal words. So yeah, just stick to really basic conversation. And a hint about these umbrellas is that there's a rainy season in Japan, so it rains a lot, and you're probably going to be carrying an umbrella at some point in your journey. And so one time I was walking outside in the pouring rain. I hailed a taxi, and I mean, it was really raining. And the taxi driver opened the door for me in the back, which is what they do. You don't have to open the doors yourself. The taxi drivers will do that from inside. I jumped into the taxi, and I had, I put down my umbrella and jumped into the taxi. The taxi driver, very patiently, he got out of his car. He walked around to my side of the taxi. He opened my door. He took my umbrella and he gave it a big shake outside the taxi. And then he handed the umbrella back to me. So I will never forget that. That's what you're supposed to do before you get into a taxi or go into a building, is you should shake the excess water out of your umbrella. So I'm very thankful for that very kind taxi driver. He was a little miffed, but he didn't show his anger. He just did it. Another thing is to not drink or eat while walking. And while this just seems to be something your mother might say to you, oh, don't do that, there's reason behind it. And I also didn't really take much notice of this before, but when I was at an outdoor flea market once, one of the vendors there yelled at someone, said, don't even come close to my stall with that drink in your hand. And so what it is that they don't want to take the chance of something being spilled, If you were to bump into someone, it might, you might spill something onto them. Or if you're eating, you might have greasy fingers. So these are all reasons why just don't even take the chance. Just don't drink or eat while walking. If you've just gotten a drink out of a vending machine, most people will stand at the vending machine and have their drink there and then move on. Public garbage cans in Japan, they're quite rare, but when you do find them, they will be separated into PET bottles, bottles and cans, non-burnables and burnables. Starting from right to left, PET bottles, those are your plastic drink bottles. And when you're finished, they go in there. And they're always round holes so that you can't put something square in it. The next is your bottles and cans. And these are glass bottles or metal and aluminum cans can go in there. Then you have your non-burnables, which is anything that is non-burnable or from a substance that isn't bottles or cans or PET bottles. And even like foil it seems like it would be non-burnable, but actually it's considered burnable. So basically burnables are for everything else that is not bottles and cans or PET bottles. So paper, plastic, foils, mammals, vertebrates, eggshells, bones, etc., anything else. And then on public transportation, switch your mobile phones to manner mode. Beware of noises emanating from headphones, keyboards, etc. I have seen lately on the Shinkansen, the bullet train, there's even a sign that says, please don't tap on your keyboard because it might ruin the atmosphere of the people around you. You will sometimes see people on trains doing some of these things, but they are being rude and the people around it do not appreciate it. Be mindful of baggage on Japan's famously crowded trains. So if you look at our little illustration on the right here, this cat's got all this baggage. They do have luggage delivery services in Japan. They're very handy and very reasonably priced. You can send your luggage all around the country from one place to another you can send your main bags to your next accommodation and they'll keep them for you until you arrive. And in the meantime, you can just take a day pack for the couple days it's going to take you to get there. Handing things to people. Both hands are used for documents, books, gifts, or when presenting something to someone, whether you're giving it or receiving it. Any printed words should be facing the receiver. So up in the left-hand corner, we have here a cashier showing the bill to the customer. So it's so such that the customer can read the print on it. On the right, we are showing someone who's giving a gift to another person, both hands for giving, and the other cat has both hands for receiving. When you're visiting someone's house to take a gift, and a language tip here is dozo, which means here you go. So whenever you hand something over, you can just say dozo. Exchanging business cards. I do realize that some people may be visiting on business. And if you're given a business or a name card, then accept it with both hands. And then when you receive it, you should look at it carefully, almost admiringly. This is a chance for you to just make a little bit of communication with the person. You might look at maybe their title and you might mention it. Oh, you're the, managing director or something. Or, oh, I see you live in Tokyo or something like that. A little bit of chit chat. And if you're sitting at a table, you can place the card on the table in front of you for a while. What you don't want to do is just take it with hardly looking at it, stick it into your wallet, because that's not very polite. Also, do not fold it or play with it or write on it. And when you do go to put it away, make sure it's on the top of either of the other cards or whatever is in your wallet. And again, in business, when you are visiting an office, wait to be told where to sit at the table. And this is an interesting thing. So Japan is a very stratified society. And so your CEO will have a special place at the table, and it will go down through the ranks to the lowest person. I visited a office the other day, and the CEO, the president, he said, "You guys go ahead in the office and sit down. I'll be right in." So I thought, okay, we'll go in, and we just presumed that it would be a regular order that we're all used to. And we got in there, and the Japanese even didn't know what to do. We were just so surprised because the table was rectangular. So all of the sitting etiquette just, went into the air. Like we were like, where are we supposed to sit? Where is the president supposed to sit? So we all just stood there and waited for him to come back. And I would recommend really that anytime you go into a room, wait to be told where to sit, because there is protocol, whether it be a business setting or not, even in a restaurant sometimes. So. And also, when you're giving your business card to someone, again, both hands. Taking photos, always ask before taking someone's photo. A lot of Japanese people do not want their photos on social media. So do be very respectful of that. You'll see a lot of people, if they do put up photos, they'll often have the faces pixeled out or a black box over them. Be careful when taking photos in public places, so that you don't want other people who are just innocently walking by to be in your photo. And you don't want to have like any house numbers, town names. Small town names can even be a little bit tricky. So do be careful. There was a case once where a celebrity had his photo taken when he was out, not that well known, but semi-celebrity. And he was apparently holding hands with a girlfriend, and that photo got out to the public. And then everyone was very upset that he was, having an affair on the side. So people are very careful about that now. In group photos, the most important person or the guest goes in the middle. So if you ask to take a photo with some old lady or something, be sure to put her in the middle so she feels special. Your language tip here is say cheese. So they use the same word cheese, but they make it Japanese by saying cheese with a U in the end. So thanks for joining me today. I hope I've answered some of your questions. If you have some, then do please put them in the chat. And arigatou gozaimashita.
Thank you, Amy. That was really concise and elegantly presented presentation on Japanese etiquette. It was almost Japanese in its presentation. Thank you very much. Very quickly, we do have a number of questions, which I'll run through, and I suspect you can answer most of them fairly quickly. Okay, so the first one is from Carol. What do you do when you've showered in your room, but then decide later to bathe in the onsen? Do you need to clean yourself again when you go down to the onsen? I was in this position once. I decided not to go into the onsen because I wasn't sure what to do.
That's such a good question. Yeah, I think the point is here that if there are other people in the onsen, they're not going to know that you've bathed before. So they're all going to be just disgusted at just looking at someone go into the water. So some of the older ladies, but only in the really local baths, will just shower off with water. But I don't recommend that being a guest in another country. Yeah, just shower again and have fun, double the fun.
Michael, when using disposable or hashi chopsticks for eating, is it acceptable to use the non-pointed end for taking more from a communal plate?
It depends. It can be acceptable, but if you're worrying about manners, then just don't do it. But if you are, for example, just with good friends, maybe you're over there, like you're having a barbecue, or maybe you're with some really close friends in izakaya, then I think it's fine, but not among company that you don't know very well. Yeah.
There is the argument that we don't know where your hands have been, so whichever end of the chopstick doesn't really matter.
That's right.
I've been told by some Japanese friends. So.
That's right. And I was even once told by some friends that if they tell you to go ahead and turn your chopsticks around, it's okay. That means you're basically family. So it's a huge compliment.
And again, continuing Michael's questioning, if not leaving a small portion at the end of the meal, how do you signal to the host that you've had sufficient to eat?
Well, it depends on the type of where you are, right? So if you're being served, like rice will often be in the middle of the table in a rice cooker. So you can take what you want or what you don't want, or they'll come around and they'll serve you if it's a restaurant. And at that time would, be the time to take a quick survey of what's on the tray, and then just, offer to give it back at that time.
This is a question for me. Can you just touch on the use of negative, like no? And in this instance, for example, what would be the best phrase to say you would not like it?
Okay. You can, if you want to use Japanese, you can say keiko desu, which means basically no thank you, I'm okay. And that's extremely polite, I think, keiko desu. And or if you just don't have the language skills, or you're not getting your point across, you can actually take your fingers and put them over like this and say, and just kind of wince like, oh, sorry. If you just go like that, then it's a bit strong. But if you just kind of like, and then they'll understand.
A little tilt of the head.
A tilt, right, and a smile.
At the restaurant, is it inappropriate to use chopsticks you carry with you when you do not want to use wooden disposable chopsticks?
No, that's totally fine. Yeah, sure. And just don't leave them behind, right? Remember to take them with you. Yeah. And it's like anything that you leave there by mistake. Even if you are just like have some some extra papers that you just want to get rid of, if you leave them behind, they will come running after you, even after you've left the restaurant, to say, oh, you've forgotten something. So do try to take everything with you and not use your tray as a garbage can.
Is it acceptable to drink directly from your bowl once you've finished your soba, udon, ramen, noodles?
I'm sorry, one more time?
Is it acceptable to drink the what's left of the soup directly from your bowl once you've finished your soba, udon, ramen, noodles?
Absolutely. And if it's part of really cleaning up, eating everything you're given, isn't it? So yeah, absolutely. And that's often the best part.
Is it customary to give gifts to an innkeeper upon arrival? If so, what are appropriate gifts, and when should you present the gift?
Yes, an innkeeper, especially a traditional Japanese inn, they receive lots of gifts, and as they should, because they're going to be taking care of you while you're there. And if you can take something from typical from your country, or if you don't have something, because it should be small enough that they don't feel like they need to give a return gift. Gifting is a whole other area. I could write a whole book on gifting. And it's one of my favorite aspects of Japanese culture, actually. And so you could bring a little keychain, a pin. I know the Australians often take those little koalas, that clip onto things. And people, will be very happy with just small gifts like that. If you're already in the country and you just want to pick up something, there's a great tradition of taking souvenirs from the last place you visited. So you can get a small box of, some kind of Japanese sweet, or little chocolates or whatever it is. They're anywhere from 300 to 500 yen, so they don't cost much. Yeah. But yes, that would be greatly appreciated and will go a long way to maybe covering up for some faux pas you might make.
Should we remove necklaces or jewelry when in public bars? And I would add to that, could you touch on the situation with tattoos in public?
Yeah. Okay, I think jewelry, there's no specific problem with jewelry, but certainly bracelets, anything that's really going to be in the water all the time and maybe clanky or something. Also, a lot of things get lost. And people take things off and then they forget them, right? Even if they're showering. So it's best to leave all your valuables in your room before you go to the bath. And I think that's really more the point there. And then tattoos. Okay, so the thing about tattoos, and it is changing, but the problem with tattoos is that they're associated with, gangs and yakuza. And I mean, of course, if they see a foreigner who's just got one tattoo, they're not going to think you're a gangster. But the problem is that they can't let some people with tattoos in and others not. So basically, they just say no to all of them, and it takes care of the problem right away. So they don't want gangsters coming in and saying, oh, well, you've let all these other people with tattoos in. Why won't you let me in? Because they're not going to waltz up and say, I'm a gangster, right? So they can't always tell who is and who isn't, especially because they haven't taken their shirt off yet, right? So, and there's another thing about the gangsters in Japan is they're actually very polite. They have impeccable etiquette. So if there is a sign up that says no tattoos, they won't go there. And it's the same at beaches in Japan. I live on a really tiny island, and we have a nice beach. And we started getting some gangsters. And of course, we didn't really know it till they took off their clothes and then they're just all tattooed. And the problem is it makes the people around them feel uncomfortable. And so what we did is we just put up these little signs in Japanese that said, no tattoos, please. And they didn't come back because then they knew that they weren't welcome. So it seems to work. You can cover them up. If you have small tattoos, cover them up. You can try like your onsens or your baths that are where a lot of tourists go. They're probably going to be a lot more lax about that rule. And some are even changing now. And I think there's a website out there now which lists all the onsen you can go to in Japan that accept people with tattoos.
If I can add to that there's also often private rooms you can use. They often call them kazoku buro, family bath, which is private, so it's not an issue there. But also in a ryokan with onsen or bathing facilities, most Japanese are very timely, so they'll start eating normally about 6. So they'll bathe before the evening meal, and then after 6, if you go, the chances are you have the baths for yourself. So if you just confirm with your host or hostess, I have some tattoos, I'll go a bit later if that's all right, and they're increasingly open to the idea, but as long as their Japanese clientele aren't discomforted by it and there's a way around it, they'll try and do that. That's my experience. Okay, on to the next one. Is it okay to ask for a fork?
Yeah, sure. I'm trying to think. It's like when my father came to visit, we were eating udon and he asked for a fork. And he found it was even harder to eat udon with a fork than it is with chopsticks. But this might be something you might want to take with you. They have small carry things if you really can't use chopsticks, and some people can't. They might even have a disability. So best to take it with you than to ask, though, because some places might not even have forks.
There are also those sort of practice chopsticks that are not common in Japan, but overseas, which if you bring those to Japan with you, they're pretty effective, I think.
Yeah, it's a great idea. And they do have those for children in Japan. You can go to the 100 yen store, actually, and find them there. So they're small, but, hey, if you can learn to work with those, that's fine too, I think.
Okay, often meals on tatami mats. So although it is changing, they are bringing in chairs for tatami mats because elderly Japanese in particular are finding it difficult to sit on the floor now, and younger Japanese indeed are finding it difficult to sit on the floor. But there's still many places where you have to sit on the floor. Do you have any tips for achieving this in the most comfortable fashion?
Sure. It's rather unfortunate that sitting on the floor can be very uncomfortable if you're not used to it. So men can sit cross-legged, which really helps. Women, however, really cannot get away with doing that unless you're in super casual circumstances with friends. So in really formal situations, weddings, funerals, and stuff, then even men are expected to sit like women on their haunches. So what most Japanese people do is they'll come in, they'll sit properly for the first 10 minutes, and then after they're uncomfortable, so they'll move the legs to the side. And for women especially, the men seem to be okay with crossed legs, but if you can't cross your legs, you could also just have your legs to the side. And I know that with my husband, who's really the most unflexible person in the world, I think, people see his pain, they feel it, and they'll say, it's okay, you can put your legs out, like stretch them out in front of you. So of course, that's the ideal, is to stretch the legs out, but yeah, you need to be careful about it. And another thing, though, is if you're at a restaurant and you're sitting at a table on tatami mat, you can always, every now and then, go and sit with your legs over onto, that's the barrier where you take your shoes off to go up into the tatami mat room. And sometimes the tables will come all the way to the end. And so you can, sit there with your legs hanging down while still eating.
Increasingly, the size chairs being used on tatami mats, seat backs, so sort of just the L shape, no legs, and they're very helpful as well. So
that's true. And I think in those, you're expected to put your legs out then, aren't you, to stretch them out?
I'm not sure the Japanese normally would do, but that's probably the most comfortable way for many non-Japanese. Okay, last question. Slightly off topic, but no problem. Do you have a beginning Japanese language course to recommend?
Oh gosh, I wish I did. I recommend definitely immersing yourself. And if you, I mean, gosh, I think they would all be pretty good because they have to cover the basics. I have a few pages of Japanese in the back of my own book for travelers, but yeah, I think probably most of your beginning classes are going to be pretty good. Even online these days, you can take them. And you'll also learn some etiquette, I would imagine.
Yeah. Duolingo is one of the big ones, isn't it? I think at the moment online. There's a few others as well. Amy, that's it. A lot of people saying thank you very much for the interesting chat. And I found it very interesting, although I knew it all anyway. I found it very nice to hear it from your perspective. I look forward to catching up with you again sometime soon. And that's it from us today. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And if you need to recap, because there's a lot of information there, it will be on our YouTube channel, Walk Japan's YouTube channel, and through our website, through the Talk Japan pages on our website, as mentioned earlier. Thank you very much, Amy, and thank you for everyone else for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.